Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be introducing the concept of exceptions, which is basically an object-oriented way of error handling. We're going to introduce kind of what are new structures within PHP code. We're going to be introducing what are known as try-catch blocks, and they're blocks that work in pairs to be able to handle errors in your code. We're going to talk about a built-in class to PHP called the exception class, which is used to encompass an error. It's a class that essentially represents an error that's occurred. And then we're going to talk about a concept that'll be made clear as we go through it, known as rethrowing exceptions. So basically, PHP provides a way to more gracefully handle errors. Right now, the way we've been doing code is you can suppress the error using the at operator, and then maybe output a message on your own. Or if you don't catch the error, PHP will just output its very sort of terse, ugly error. Well, what PHP does is it provides provides functionality called try-catch blocks. And basically, what a try block is it's a section of code that you enclose within curly braces. And when you encounter an error condition within your code, for example, you try to open a file and you get an error, instead of just outputting an error message there, what you can do is it's called throwing an exception. And what it is, it's basically signaling to the code that an error has occurred. And what you do is use the keyword throw, and then what you do is you pass it a new instance of the exception class, which you don't have to include the definition for in your PHP files. It's built into PHP, which typically contains an error message that you're going to include. And then we're going to see in a second that there is a catch block associated with this that is able to handle these different errors. So let's take a look at that actually. When an exception is thrown, as soon as an exception is thrown, you encounter an error, you throw an error, the code in that try block stops. So for example, if we were executing some code along here in the try block, we encountered an error and we threw this exception. Any code that was down here no longer gets executed. Instead, what happens is execution resumes down here to a catch block. A catch block basically says if an exception object that's of type exception has been thrown, and here we're throwing an object of type exception. Now the reason you can actually catch other types of exceptions, and that involves inheritance, which is a little more advanced object-oriented concept that we're not getting into in this course, but basically what the catch block does is you can assign it to catch different types of exceptions. In this case, we're just going to have it catch the generic exception class that's provided by PHP. So basically, we have some code along here, an error occurred, we throw an exception and set the error message for this exception object to error. What's going to happen is code's immediately going to stop, nothing around here is going to get executed, it's going to go to the catch statement, it's going to test if the exception thrown was of the type exception class, whose class type was type exception. Because it was, this is going to match. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to assign it to a value E, and then it's going to execute a section of code. So basically what this gives you the opportunity to do is when that error is thrown, you can catch it and perform whatever sort of error handling you want to do. In this particular case, as we'll learn about, you're actually just going to be outputting an error message. So let's actually take a look at a basic try-catch block. Here we have just a regular section of PHP code with a try statement. And actually, we're not even testing for an error. We're just, to demonstrate the concept, we're just throwing an exception. We're throwing a new instance of the exception class. We're not even passing it any parameters, which is something you can do. We have an associated catch block with this try block that's going to say if an exception is thrown up here, go ahead and catch it, and then execute the code within these curly braces. In this case, all we're going to do is output an error message that says an exception has been caught. So, and because this throw always occurs, this is always going to execute. It's not conditional. Typically, you'd have some if statement that would say if this condition fails, then throw the exception. In this particular example, we're just throwing it automatically to demonstrate. So let's take a look at the example. And we can see an exception has been caught. So basically what happened was PHP ran this code, it got to this line, it says, okay, an this signals an error. I'm throwing an error. I'm stopping any code. And then I'm going to go down here and process whatever error handling code is associated with that exception. Now, one thing that to notice is, let's say down here we had an echo statement, hello after. We're going to call it hello before. So we have a statement before we throw the exception and a statement afterward, an echo statement afterwards. Now, when you throw an exception, execution immediately stops in that code. So this line is not going to get executed. So if we go and run this code, all we're going to see output is this hello before, and then along with our exception here. Let's just put a break in there. So when we rerun our script, we're going to see hello before, but we don't see hello after, and that's because as soon as the throw occurs, execution of the statements in the try block stops, and it's going to say an exception has been caught. So basically, when an exception is caught, it's assigned to a variable that you can access between the curly braces. We saw in the last example that it actually looks like this. And here you can define this in your code, whatever value you want. And basically what that says is this is going to catch any exceptions that are thrown within its associated try block, and then it's going to assign the exception that it catches to this variable here that you declare. In this case, we declared it E. So if we wanted to access the different properties and methods of this exception object, which we're going to talk about in a second, you would do it using this E method. For example, E get message, which outputs its error message, or gets its error message. And so in these catch blocks, this is typically where your error handling occurs and allows you to sort of gracefully exit rather than just having some, terse PHP error statement going